Well, staying with energy-related issues, you may have seen a report today by the Sunday Times newspaper saying that Eskom did not inform the country when, according to the paper, South Africa dipped into stages 7 and 8 of load shedding.
Imagine being without power for 8, 9, or even 10 hours a day. That's been the situation in South Africa for a while now.
It is going to be a cold, dark night for many South Africans, with stage 6 load shedding announced.
And things have also been getting worse. Not only do South Africans have to worry about power outages, which the government refers to as load shedding, but the government itself has also become corrupted. South Africa used to being a booming country with 11 official languages and one of the largest producers in chromium, gold, and platinum. The country has hosted numerous World Cups, and the wildlife in South Africa is something that has drawn many tourists to the country. But what happened to South Africa in the last few years is something that many people could not even imagine. Things have been spiraling downward thanks to a corrupt government that seems to be in it for the money and no longer for the people. If you've been keeping up with the latest news, you might have noticed South Africa making headlines. This time, however, it's not the good kind of headline. Rather, news publications have been reporting on corruption, power outages, high crime rates, and other bad things that are happening right now in the country. Above all, the government has become a meme, a joke. In fact, the term South Africa government funny has become a trend on platforms like YouTube, and there are countless videos showing how official meetings seem like a comedy show.
It's not working. We request that they must speak in English so that all members can hear.
Yeah, we can do that after the sitting. Continue, Honorable Sheikh Imam. Take your seat, Honorable Member.
Just one example of how parliament members of the government do not take things seriously, but rather make a joke out of meetings that drive critical decisions that affect the people of South Africa. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into load shedding, the ANC, government meetings, and corruption, all of which are happening in South Africa right now. Load shedding is a term that any South African will be familiar with in the modern day. The term was first coined in 2007 when Eskom, a government-owned power producer in South Africa, announced that they struggled to supply the entire country with power at the same time. This led to the introduction of scheduled power outages. The main idea, according to Eskom at the time, was to prevent a collapse in the power grid. At that time, load shedding wasn't a huge problem for the country, as it didn't have as much of an impact. Recently, however, things have started to get bad.
This is the reality of South Africans right now. Most wake up and go to bed with no electricity. Electricity provider Eskom has implemented load shedding in stages, which means higher the load shedding stage, the more frequent customers will experience power outages.
Due to the struggle at Eskom, stages were introduced for load shedding. These stages generally went from stage 1 up to stage 8. With higher stages, as noted in several news publications, resulting in longer power outages or more frequent ones during the day. For quite some time, South Africa remained in the lower stages of load shedding, but recently, this is no longer the case.
In terms of the winter outlook, we consider 3 scenarios, and what this indicates is that depending on where we land on a particular day, we may have up to stage 8 load shedding if our interventions to reduce demand and improve reliability are not effective.
Recent official announcements from the government state that South Africa might soon face the highest stage of load shedding, stage 8. This would mean several hours a day without any power for both the average household as well as businesses. Now, an important thing that we need to keep in mind is the fact that it is winter in South Africa right now. During winter, it's critical to have access to power for things like heaters and to ensure hot food can be served at the dinner table. Unfortunately, it also seems like this winter, South Africa is on its way to facing the worst load shedding status thus far. As the government announces this crisis state of Eskom, news publications from all over the world have been reporting on the situation. If that's not bad enough, recently, Eskom has also proposed setting up plans for higher stages of load shedding. In fact, some reports have explained how Eskom wants to establish plans for stages up to 16, at which time the citizens of South Africa would be in the dark for most hours of the day. If stage 16 load shedding were to hit South Africa during winter, it would leave many people vulnerable. Communities would be unable to generate heat, cook hot food, and lives will be disrupted. But it's not just about the need for power. As the load shedding crisis continues to become more serious, South Africa is facing several other dilemmas. One of the other serious issues that needs to be addressed is the fact that as load shedding becomes worse, the crime rate in South Africa is also soaring. When there is no power, criminals see it as an opportunity to move in.
Here in the community of Athlone in Cape Town, neighbors are still traumatized and reeling because a dear friend and neighbor was attacked, murdered in his own home on his own premises as he was approaching alleged robbers on his property.
There have been several reports of criminal activities happening during load shedding, especially later at night. When load shedding happens at night, it leaves countless numbers of South African citizens vulnerable. The lights go out, alarms don't work, and this all creates the risk of criminal activity, including theft, breaking into houses, stealing cars, and, worst case scenario, murder. Even though the topic of crime during load shedding has been touched on several occasions, the government still continues to implement load shedding and is yet to announce a solution to the crisis that the entire country is facing right now. Load shedding is also costly to the economy of South Africa. While large corporations in the country have the funds for generators and other options that can help to ensure the buildings continue to serve customers during power outages, the same is not true for many small businesses. In fact, many small businesses have already been adversely affected by this entire power crisis that the country faces. Being unable to afford generators, many of these businesses are forced to close during load shedding periods. Some remain open, but cannot accept cards, only working with cash during these times. When the lights go out, even during the daytime, it also raises a concern for theft. This is the reality that small business owners in South Africa are facing right now, and when they choose to keep the doors shut during load shedding hours, it means they are losing money. So let's take a closer look at how much it costs to install generators or other alternative power options in South Africa. There are generators available for relatively inexpensive prices, but the problem with these is the fact that they are meant to only power up a few basic items, such as TV or a computer. For most people, this is not enough, and a whole home solution is needed. There are different systems available, but on average, South Africans can expect to pay anything from 170,000 rands upward, which calculates to just under $10,000. When we turn our attention to the latest sources of income in South Africa, we see that the average household makes around 374,000 rands annually, which is just over $19,000. There are, however, a lot of households that earn far less than this every year, which means the minimum cost of installing a whole house generator solution would calculate to more than half of the average South African's annual income. This means most people in South Africa, especially those in townships and rural areas, are not able to afford this type of solution. But this brings us to yet another problem that the country is facing. The government is trying to block people from generating their own power. Yes, you heard that right. The same government that is failing to ensure its people have access to power is also now trying to stop people from using alternative ways to generate power. So, with this in mind, what are the people supposed to do? We should turn our focus to recent news in South Africa. A local community in Frankfurt was able to enjoy a power solution that helped them avoid the strain the Eskom's load shedding plan was putting on the community. A local company, known as Rural Free State, developed a solar panel infrastructure that would help to reduce some of the burdens that come from the high load shedding levels. While it did not completely eliminate load shedding, it still allowed people to enjoy fewer hours of power outages. When RFS reached close to the end of these systems, Eskom filed to have them shut off about half of the solar panels that were in effect. Eskom announced that Frankfurt is avoiding load shedding and that the solution they have implemented does not comply with the country's national standards and regulations. Many experts believe that this is clearly a way in which Eskom and the government are denying the people access to opportunities that would provide them with power, while the main energy supplier of the country can't. How did things come to this, you ask? Well, it's actually not a new problem that the South African government faces. In fact, experts say that this is a problem that has been coming on for the past 15 years. Over the years, Eskom and the government have continuously failed to attend to certain things that have led to the situation South Africa is in right now. In fact, Eskom has accumulated debt that has already surpassed $26 billion, and they are struggling to pay back all of this debt. This has led to constant increases in the cost of electricity to citizens who need to cough up to help Eskom pay the debt it has incurred. Eskom has old infrastructures and power stations that are constantly failing. Things that have also been gradually contributing to the state of disaster that President Cyril Ramaphosa announced recently. In 2022, load shedding affected South Africa for 288 days throughout the year, and in some areas, as many as 15 hours in a single day were spent without power. The people of South Africa have also spoken up, arranging strikes and protests to tell the government and Eskom that they have had enough. It's really not a surprise that this happened, considering everything that the people of the country have gone through in the last few years. and things have been escalating at a much greater rate in recent months, with many people considering load shedding, crime, and the government itself getting out of control. Now, let's talk about corruption. If you have read about South Africa recently, then this word has likely shown up in a few places. Yes, South Africa is now full of corruption, and it is deeply rooted in the government. A government is supposed to support its people and provide them with the basic essentials they need to live, while also contributing to a successful economy. The moves made by the South African government, a particular focus on the ANC, however, have been quite the opposite. Earlier in this year, an interview with Andre de Ruyter, former CEO of Eskom, went viral. During this interview, de Ruyter spoke of the corruption that is happening in Eskom and the government, and how the two are closely linked, working together, and ultimately causing more problems for the country. In this interview, de Ruyter went on to explain how he saw the corruption with his own eyes, and even though he tried to intervene, he was told to stand down. This interview took place after de Ruyter announced his retirement from the position of Eskom CEO. But even though he was meant to still stay on at Eskom for a while after the interview, he was let go 2 days after this appeared on live television. De Ruyter then disappeared for a while, with many people considering this move to be for his own protection. There have even been allegations of attempts on his life after he appeared on this interview, but no official announcements have been made. Eskom did respond to de Ruyter's allegations that he made in the interview, but mostly denied everything that was said.
Andre de Ruyter survived an attempt on his life after an apparent assassin reportedly laced his coffee with cyanide a day after he resigned as Eskom CEO.
One allegation states that de Ruyter's coffee was laced with poison after he resigned, for example. A while after the interview, de Ruyter suddenly released a book called Truth to Power, where he went on to make further allegations and provide a more in-depth look at just how corrupt the government truly is, at least from the perspective he had as the CEO of Eskom. Of course, the opinions on what de Ruyter said during the interview and in his book are mixed. Some people believe that Andre de Ruyter has done the right thing and firmly believes in the allegations he made. When you look at what is happening in South Africa's government right now, these things actually make sense. Then, there are those who believe that de Ruyter should be seen as a hero and that what he has done is not a good thing, regardless of what the people believe. One fact that has been established for certain is the fact that corruption is now deeply rooted into the government. The ANC and even Eskom, this is a major problem, as the government of South Africa is supposed to look out for its people, but right now, it rather seems like the government is looking for strategies to steal from its own people or to use the citizens of the country to help pay back debt.
The ANC is also out of ideas and just exists to be in office. The Prof has made time.
Many people believe this theory, that the ANC doesn't have any ideas on how to solve the many problems that they've created. Instead, they're just staying in the office to, well, be in the office. Officials from the government, including the president, have now appeared in several live broadcasts and public speakings where they said the problem with corruption and the power outages would be dealt with. The president also declared a state of disaster in South Africa recently, explaining that this move is to help businesses like hospitals continue to run during the load shedding. The president has also reported that during this state of disaster, the government will be implementing techniques that would provide support for small business owners who are being affected by these power outages. Even though there are a lot of announcements from the government and ANC leaders, it seems like these just remain words. Thus far, little action has been taken by these leaders in order to assist South Africa in healing itself and getting out of the dilemma that the entire country is facing at the moment. This means that the government is all talk and no action, and the efforts that people in South Africa have been making, such as the implementation of solar systems, are being shut down by the government, which favors Eskom as the sole supplier of electricity in the country. Eskom might also be starting a war with the farmers in South Africa. Farms produce a majority of the food that is on the shelves of supermarkets and fresh produce stores in the country. They need access to consistent electricity when they want to be productive and provide fresh fruits, vegetables, and other foods for the people in the country. Many farmers have started to look at alternative power generation methods that they could use to continue working on their produce during the hours of load shedding. The power outages have already been costly to these farms, and now Eskom is warning to take legal action against farms looking to generate their own power. What this means is that the government and Eskom are essentially denying farms access to power. These farms are heavily reliant on electricity for irrigation and several other processes that play a critical role in ensuring that they can ship fresh foods to local stores in the country. The Transvaal Agricultural Union has announced that right now they are not going to take any action against Eskom Eskom in defense of these warnings from the power facility. They will, however, carefully assess the movements from Eskom, and if they do declare legal actions against farms that use solar systems and generators to make their own energy, then the union will respond with appropriate actions. While South Africa is struggling, the president is frequently seen heading to other countries, making deals with other governments, and more, all while leaving behind the people of South Africa, who look up to him as a resolver of the disaster that is currently affecting the country. Is South Africa falling, or has it fallen already? Recent years have been rough for the average South African. The economy is crashing, people are being left in the dark, and crime is on the rise. And these are only some of the problems that this country is facing right now. One would think that the government has a solution to the problems that the country has to face. Yet it seems like this time, it is the government that causes most of these issues. With corruption rooted so deeply in the ANC and the government, serious changes need to be made. Corrupt leaders in the government need to be removed, but that would only be the very beginning of a long recovery journey that the country will have to endeavor. If you enjoyed the content of this video and learned something new, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Those of you who are from South Africa, tell us a bit about how load shedding has affected you and your local community, and let us know if you've been looking at alternative power generation methods by yourself.